The summer weather was perfect. Not too hot, not too cold, not too humid, not too stormy. Myself and my little brother Kevin were gearing up for a camping trip with our parents to a remote lake up north, deep in the woods. It was supposed to be a bit of R&R, fishing, campfires, and just having fun before the grind of school started again. I was jazzed about the fishing part, especially since I was about to turn 16 and Kevin was just 7. We haven't had many family outings like this, so we were determined to make the most of it. We rolled into the lakeside late that afternoon after what felt like an eternity in the car. We unpacked at a quaint 2-bedroom cabin right by the water. Kevin and I had to bunk together, which was cool. The rooms were pretty spacious. After a day full of splashing and goofing around on the lake, our folks wanted to check out a small town about 30 minutes away. I'd babysat Kevin plenty of times before, and he wasn't much trouble, so I didn't fuss. By the time they headed out, the sun was setting, bathing everything in gold. Figuring we were done for the day, I sprawled on the couch, enjoying the breeze wafting through the open windows. It was our only relief from the heat, with no air conditioning in the cabin. I must have dozed off. Suddenly, I'm jolted awake by Kevin's voice. "Jeffrey! Jeffrey! Help me!" Heart slamming against my ribs, I leaped off the couch and grabbed the nearest flashlight. Charging out the door, I plunged into the thick forest fringe, the flashlight beam slicing through the night. The deeper into the woods I went, the more frantic I felt. "Jeffrey! Jeffrey! Help!" His voice sounded again, urgent, terrified. I picked up my pace, heart pounding in my ears, rushing towards the sound. I burst into a small clearing, and from the corner of my eye, caught a glimpse of something massive and dark shifting between the trees. Twigs snapped under its weight. Frozen, my heart thumped so loud, I swore it echoed off the trees. More crashing through the woods, coming my way, fast. That was when I turned and bolted, legs pumping, lungs burning, racing back toward what I hoped was the safety of the cabin. Bursting inside, I slammed the door shut and deadbolted it, panting and bent double, trying not to throw up from fear. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone to call my parents. "They're on their way back now," they assured after I blurted out what happened, instructing me sternly not to open the door for anyone. Catching my breath, I crept to the bedroom where Kevin and I slept, and there he was, curled up under the covers, sound asleep. My heart stopped. Had he been there the whole time? In my panic at hearing his voice outside, I hadn't even checked the room. Sitting on the edge of the bed, mind spinning, I thought about what tried to lure me into the woods. Chills spider walked up my spine. The voice, it knew my name. Was it a bear, Bigfoot, a ghost, or some creep? When my parents finally got back, I recounted everything, their faces clouded with worry. They shared that while in town, a local had mentioned people disappearing in these woods, and to be cautious. "Wish that was in the brochure," I muttered. As we packed up the next morning, the lake shimmered innocently in the sun. The forest stood silently around us, as if the night's horrors were just a bad dream. But whatever was out there, it knew my name, and that was no dream. Sometimes things just aren't what they seem. I never thought a simple drive could turn into the longest night of my life. It started off as just another Friday. My roommate Jake and I were all packed up and ready to head home for a long-awaited weekend break from college. We joked around, planning to surprise our families with our sudden arrival. No calls, no texts, just showing up. It was our way of keeping things exciting. The drive was smooth at first, roads familiar and traffic minimal. It was past 9 p.m. after all. But as we ventured further into the rural roads, the engine started coughing. At first, it was just a hiccup, and then, with no warning, our old sedan gave a final groan and died. headlights dimming out into complete darkness. Great. Stranded in the middle of nowhere, and of course our phones had barely any signal. We managed to turn on the flashlights on our cell phones, casting eerie shadows as we decided to walk toward the nearest gas station, which, according to a barely loading GPS, was a couple of miles back the way we came. The night was unusually quiet. Every sound seemed amplified. A twig snapping would have us clutching each other's arms. We tried to keep the mood light, telling stories and making fun of each other's increasingly jittery nerves. But as we walked, a persistent rustling sound from the woods lining the road seemed to follow us. Every few steps we took, it took some. We tried to convince ourselves it was just a deer or some small animal, but deep down, we feared it was something else. The rustling grew louder, closer. Our light-hearted banter died down, replaced by tense silence and quick glances over our shoulders. Our brisk walk turned into a jog, neither of us wanting to admit we were running from whatever might be lurking just beyond view. When the lights of the gas station finally came into sight, it was a relief like no other. I've never been happier to see the fluorescent glow of a 24/7 open sign. We burst through the door, panting and sweaty, probably looking like we'd seen a ghost. The guy at the counter raised an eyebrow, but before he could speak, a police officer stepped inside. The officer took one look at us and asked if we'd seen or heard anything unusual. Turns out, there was a manhunt going on. A suspect in a series of violent crimes was believed to be hiding in the area, the woods, exactly where we'd heard the sounds. Chills ran down my spine as we recounted our experience, the officer's face growing grimmer with each word. They ended up giving us a ride home, a patrol car shadowing us until we reached the safety of our houses. It was supposed to be a fun surprise visit, but instead, Jake and I spent the weekend jumping at every sound, reliving that harrowing walk every time the house settled or a car passed by. Looking back, it's one of those stories that seems unreal, like something you'd see in a horror movie. But whenever I find myself on a lonely road at night, I can't help but listen for the rustling that comes just out of sight, and I wonder if we really escaped unscathed, or if part of us is still out there, running from something unseen. Sarah and Mike had always loved nature. They'd met during a college hiking trip and bonded over muddy boots and mosquito bites. 5 years into their relationship, they set out for what was supposed to be an idyllic weekend camping in the remote stretches of the Blue Ridge Mountains. They arrived late Friday afternoon, the autumn air crisp, and the trees a kaleidoscope of fiery colors. As Mike pitched the tent, Sarah gathered firewood, the only sounds the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant call of a crow. By nightfall, their campsite was snug against the encroaching darkness of the woods. "Perfect getaway," Mike said, roasting marshmallows over the flickering fire. "Yeah, just what we needed," Sarah agreed, though a subtle unease nagged at her, a feeling of being watched. That night, in the cocoon of their tent, the unease grew. It was pitch black outside, the fire a mere glow. Then, around midnight, Sarah woke to a sound, a soft, whispering mutter just outside their tent. The wind, she thought, clinging to logic. "Mike, do you hear that?" she whispered. Mike was already awake, his eyes wide. "Someone's out there," he breathed. Heart pounding, they listened as the muttering rose, mingled now with the unmistakable sound of footsteps circling their tent. Sarah's hand found Mike's in the darkness, both too frightened to speak. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped. Silence, thick, oppressive. Then a low, chilling chuckle, and the sound of whatever was out there, slowly walking away. In the safety of dawn, they ventured outside. Around their tent, the leaves and dirt looked undisturbed, convincing them it might have been a dream, a mutual hallucination. They laughed nervously, not believing their own rationalizations. They decided to hike, hoping daylight would erase the terror of the night. As they trekked through dense woods, the beauty of fall around them, an eerie sensation remained. The deeper into the woods they went, the more the feeling of unease grew. By the time they realized they hadn't seen another soul on the trails, it was too late. They came upon a clearing, and there, in the midst of the fallen leaves, lay a weather-beaten backpack. Curious, Mike opened it, discovering a camera, a wallet, and an ID belonging to a hiker who had been reported missing the previous year. Chilled, they decided to return to camp and pack up, but backtracking proved difficult. Landmarks seemed unfamiliar, paths twisted strangely, and a fog began to roll in, thick and disorienting. Hours passed, and panic set in. Hadn't they crossed this stream before? As night approached, they finally stumbled back to their campsite, exhausted and frightened. Their earlier decision cemented. They would leave first thing in the morning. But nightfall brought no reprieve. As they tried to sleep, the whispers returned, louder now, as if multiple voices joined in an unintelligible lament. This time, they called the police, their signal weak and their voices trembling. "We're in the woods, near..." The line went dead. Morning never came for Sarah and Mike. When the search team arrived, led by the coordinates of the last phone signal, they found the tent empty, Mike's phone on the ground outside, the screen cracked, the battery dead. The whispers, some say, still echo in those woods, a chilling reminder of the couple who came to explore and never left. Theories abound, but answers remain as elusive as the morning mist that shrouds the mountains. And every so often, a brave or foolish soul ventures into the woods, tempted by the mystery, never to return. In those woods, it seems, some things are better left undisturbed,